first topic I want to discuss with you is regarding right to property. Okay, so right to property has always been a contentious issue in India. Initially, though it was a fundamental right, it later on moved out of the fundamental, it was taken out of the fundamental rights and it was still placed in the constitution, thereby making it a constitutional right. And this was also a previous UPSC question. Now coming to what has happened recently, I'll tell you what has happened recently. Now the thing is that the Article 39B of our constitution says that the state shall direct its policy towards securing that the ownership and control of the material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good. So this is something that is already mentioned in our constitution. Okay, now the idea over here is that whatever, if it is even when I'm saying the material resources of the community, I understand there are different people in the community, they have their material resources, and when their material resources, if the government finds that, for example, there is some land of yours that is crossing into an area where the government is planning to have a road construction. So now that is a material resource you have, that is a material resource all the houses on that side have as their own. But now this material resource, if it is with us itself, they will not be able to maybe widen the road or have the construction of the road, whatever. So what happens? The government puts this into practice and says that for the common good of the society, the material resources which a community owns can be so distributed. Okay, so at that point, it stops being my private property and starts being a community resource and a community material resource, and it can be distributed. When I'm saying distributed, I just want you to understand here, the idea is not that it will be taken and given to other people. The idea is it will be taken for the use of a common good, okay, which might be construction of the roads. Oh, again, it's an example. Construction of the roads is just an example for you to understand this idea. Now, here, very recently, so the Supreme Court has taken up this particular idea and they have tried to give a little bit more details into it. In India, now it is said that to hold that all private property is material resources of the community and that the ultimate aim is the state control of private resources would be incompatible with the constitutional protection. So what has happened recently is the Supreme Court has taken two of these words. One word is the material resources of the community. As I just told you, it is my private property that the government is now describing as the material resources of the community. Now, in all the cases, if the government starts thinking on this manner, then there is no concept of your own private property at all. Why? Because then you do not have any protection for your private property. Any private property can be told as it is a material resource of the community and we need it for common good and maybe can be acquired by the state. Understand? This negates the idea that private property is protected in our country. The right to property, which is right now under Article 300A, is a constitutional right. It might have lost its status of fundamental right, but still it is a constitutional right and it is something that we as citizens of a country are likely or liable to enjoy. But when the idea of material resources of the community and an idea like common good is brought in, what the Supreme Court tries to say is, first of all, both of these words are not clearly defined. What is this material resource of the community and what is the common good that you are trying to achieve? Because me losing my private property is not clearly good for me. Several other people who are losing their private property, that is also considered now as a common good. But that is also that we are losing that right, we are losing that common good when you are incorporating this. So the Supreme Court has now said that you cannot go on and define every other private property as material resource of the community. It will be brought to very strict evaluation, and if a case is filed, the court will be subjecting it to very strict evaluation to figure out if it is actually the material resource of the community, or if it is something that the government is trying to label as a material resource of the community. Similarly, the idea of common good is also going to be, or it has been said that from now onwards, you cannot keep on acquiring things saying it's for the common good. Here again, the idea of common good has to be subjected to judicial interpretation. So what has happened is, this is something like a way ahead when it comes to the right to property in our country. Okay, so the pointers you need to keep in mind is Article 39B is already there in the Constitution. The words like material resources and common good is already there in the Constitution. The Supreme Court has just gone forward and said that these terms cannot now just be loosely used, and whenever they are used, they will be subjected to judicial review. And this is what the court has now said. Okay. Now, as we move forward, we have to discuss a little bit about this new topic called as orphan drugs. Okay, before I go into the next topic, I forgot to tell you this. Right to property clearly goes under your polity current affairs. A very rare polity current affair again has shown its face. So right to property, you can put it under your polity current affairs. Moving forward, orphan drugs can be put under your science and tech section, especially health and diseases. Okay, what are orphan drugs? Okay, first of all, orphan drugs are those kind of medicines used to treat a very rare disease. Okay, now when I'm saying very rare, there is a specification for it. A disease is considered rare if it affects fewer than 2 lakh people in the US and fewer than 1 in 10,000 people in the European Union. Okay, so this is what is considered as a rare disease. This is a very global criteria that is there. Now, what has been said is, these diseases which are so rare are also called as orphan diseases. There is very less clarity on what are these diseases, how can we treat them, etc. Because in the first place, it's so rare that any kind of active research that happens in it is not considered very economically viable, because you are going to be selling it to very, very few people. So you do not have so much of interest happening in it. So orphan drugs are extremely critical when it comes to treating these orphan diseases. Orphan drugs are categorized based on the type of diseases they target and their regulatory status. For example, when it comes to, especially let's take the case of India. In India, in 2021, we published something called as National Policy for Rare Diseases. Okay, National Policy for Rare Diseases. This National Policy for Rare Diseases has not just put the idea just rare. Okay, so they've put different categories. Rare, but there is research happening. Rare, but there is no research happening. Rare, but there is a drug that is there. Rare, but there is no drugs. Each of these things are seen differently, and the necessary research is done for each of these categories. Okay, so you cannot say orphan drugs and it's all put into one category. Orphan drugs and orphan diseases are divided based on what is the type, what kind of causative organisms are there, what kind of drugs can be used, etc. Okay, now the important thing over here is, right now we are giving a lot of regulatory permissions to your orphan drug. So you are seeing general news regarding this particular orphan drug has got regulatory approval, etc. That is why I decided to just discuss what is this orphan drug, because individual drugs that they are mentioning in the news might not be very important for you. So orphan drugs are those medicines used to treat orphan diseases, and orphan diseases are those diseases which are extremely rare, so much so that this is the criteria that is available for it. Okay. Now, for example, some of the orphan diseases that are there are cystic fibrosis, Gaucher disease, hemophilia B, leukemia, ovarian cancer, etc. So now look at the kind of research has happened, and some of the orphan drugs that are currently there for these diseases are, you have the names over here, ivacaftor, alguglucarase, coagulation factor 9, rucaparib. So I don't expect you to study the name of the drugs at all. Okay, you don't need the name of the drugs, but just remember the name of the diseases at least. So cystic fibrosis, hemophilia B, leukemia, ovarian cancer, these are all seen as orphan diseases in our country. Also, a category to be telling you is, maybe a disease which is an orphan disease in America might not have the same status when it comes to India. So this also varies on how much population is affected by that particular disease. Okay, so it's not like, if it's an orphan disease in one place, it will be an orphan disease everywhere else.